Well, guys, we're here. We're finally finishing this Back to Basics series with the final letter of our acronym E, which is going to be enduring. Okay, so what we've been doing, just as a recap, we've been walking through the letters of the word house about qualities of going back to back to basics of what Jesus intends or desires for his church. And so I'm not going to go through all those just to save some time, but I encourage you to go back and check those out. But each one of these letters has represented a quality or a characteristic of the church that is faithfully obeying and pursuing our King and walking in step with him. And so today, before I get into the word enduring, I do want to recap last week because that will actually play an important part of today as an example. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Last week, with the S, we talked about the word symbolic. And we looked a little bit at the book of 1 John and talked about how we are the physical embodiment of Jesus in this world. So much so that, like John said, no one can see God, but if we love God, and actually, let me just read the verses. For example, in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, he says this. He says, "Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." Now, the logical reasoning here is that those who truly know God will, in fact, love. I hope you see that connection, that logical connection. In fact, in verse 11, skipping on down here, John continues and says, "Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." The very next verse, verse 12, says, "No one has seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us." Now, the reasoning here is, I want to lean into that word complete. It can also be understood, and I don't think this is a twist to make it fit what I'm saying, not at all. When something is complete or made it is made manifest. It's brought to reality. To complete something means the final product is brought forth. Okay, and so you could understand this, and what John's probably in my belief, and I've spent a lot of time with this, so I really believe this, and I think it's the right interpretation. When he says no one has seen God, he's talking about no one seeing the manifestation of God face to face. But if we love one another, that God whom no one has seen lives in us, and his love, which we already read earlier, he is love. His love is made complete, made to come to fruition, made to manifest itself in us. And then you can go backwards in the book of 1 John to chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. And John writes, "If anyone obeys his word," talking about God's word, "love for God is truly made," here's this word again, "complete in them." And the reasoning here is keeping the commands and the commandments and teachings of Jesus are exactly how we know that we've come to know him. And I should have wrote these down more on my notes, but if you flip or you look at even further back, I have too many tabs here. In chapter 2, at the earlier part of chapter 2 in verse 3, this is what John says: "We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands." So, in other words, it is our abiding in and obedience to King Jesus. That is how, that number one, we know God. Number two, that we are transformed because he is made more manifest in us. The Christoformity becoming more in the image of Jesus, his love being manifested in us, or love being completed in us. That's how we're transformed. And three, it is how others encounter King Jesus. So that's, in a nutshell, really quickly, and maybe a few other additives in there, what we talked about last week with the term symbolic. And really what I want you to carry into this week as we talk about enduring is this reality, that love is paramount. It is a paramount quality and characteristic of us being the church. So like each week we've kind of looked a little bit at like, what does it mean to be the church with this quality and this characteristic of the acronym HOUSE? And then what does it mean that we do out of being or having this? Yeah, out of our being, what do we do? And we've been trying to lean into that. And so I wanted to make sure I emphasize this, that love is paramount to us being this church, the church that Jesus desires. And so as we conclude this Back to Basics series, we look at our final word, enduring. Now, before I get any further, I do want to define what I'm going to interpret or what I'm going to define enduring as. This isn't just Patrick's definition. I think I found this one, and I think it's a great one, so I'm going to use it. It says something that continues on. Something that lasts a long time. It's not easily ended or rendered ineffective. And so I thought that was a perfect definition for why enduring is the final quality that we're going to look at, going back to basics, understanding what Jesus desires for the church to be and thus do. And so I think enduring really encompasses it all. Something that lasts a long time and does not lose its effectiveness. And this kind of leads into hopefully your mind's processing well, wait a second, I would say the church isn't very effective in some of its discipleship or evangelism right now. You're right. So maybe that's a good reason why we are taking a look at going back to basics to figure out, okay, what are we missing? What have we added in that's diluted what Jesus' desire for the church is? Now, a note on enduring. And I'm going to actually make this really quick. I have a bunch of texts here. If I go through it, cool. If I don't, then sorry. But a note on enduring. What I mean by this, and if you look throughout the Bible, especially at the early church, you can go back to the Israelites in the Old Testament and the positive examples they have, and really you can also learn this from their failures as a negative example. You see it in the life of Jesus. You see it in the early church. You see that enduring is not something that I'm going to interpret as passive. Now, I know that word can be a triggering word because there's a lot of toxic lifestyle agendas in the world where it says if you even use the term passive, it brings in all kinds of things. And so I'm going to define what I mean by this, and so I need you to unhook whatever trailer of baggage you have with you that word's going to conjure up and follow me with this. Because what I mean by a passive approach to endurance is I mean like you're in a storm and you just curl up in a ball and just hang on tight. Like you just, whatever's coming at you, you just brace yourself to take it, to endure, and you just kind of throw up a prayer and hope that when the storm passes, you're still there. Okay? That's what I mean by passive. Like the things are done to you and you're not moving, you're just trying to survive, if that makes sense. That's probably a better way of phrasing that. Now, on the other side, an active approach to endurance is it's not just throwing up a prayer and hoping that you'll survive. It's actually moving forward through the opposition that you have as an active approach to endurance and pushing through. Now, I need to also add some clarifications into this, okay? Now, before I get to that, though, I do need to make sure if I'm being honest in my life, a lot of the times I have approached endurance, it has been the passive way. It's been like, man, life's just really hard right now, and I just need to make it through. And what I mean by that is I just need to hold on to something and pray this passes quickly. Lord, take this burden from me. Now, granted, there is some fruit to that, but I'm going to actually make a small distinction because I think the fruit that we see from that is actually rest within the active form of endurance. Now, this could get super confusing, so I'm going to try to root this in some very concrete examples to help you be able to process this, okay? But a lot of the times that I have, and I think that we are tempted to approach this quality of enduring or endurance, we do so passively. We talk about, well, we need to circle the wagons. We have a lean season coming in, so we need to I'm just going to say this word, but we're going to hoard everything in and try to hold on to make it through. This is kind of like we need to buckle down, or we need to batten down the hatches and whatnot. And so honestly, the weakness to this approach of endurance, to interpreting endurance as this, the weakness is it oftentimes operates from a mindset of fear and self-preservation. And I don't know if you remember from the last series we did about the kingdom of self-preservation, that's when that temptation and that struggle really start to take root. Do you care more about preserving what you have or losing what you have and gaining your life and soul from Jesus? You can gain the world and lose your soul, or you can lose the world and gain life. That kind of conversation. And so my contention here this morning, today, to this afternoon, whatever time you're watching this, is that if we're going to follow King Jesus, We follow and we approach this quality of endurance from an active perspective, meaning that we walk forward, not in isolation, not alone, but together with him and with each other. That's how it was made. That's how we were made to operate. That's how the church was envisioned to go. And then we walk forward together, moving through whatever we face, hardship or otherwise. Now, the clarification that I was saying a second ago is this. There is rest within active endurance. And so I think the misunderstanding of what this rest looks like has been confused for a passive form of enduring. And what I mean by this is, here's the concrete example. I think of God's words to the Israelites when he was leading them out of Egypt, and they get to the Red Sea, and they are frantic. They're complaining, they're calling out, they're full of anxiety, they're full of fear. It's just noise and chaos. And God says in Exodus 14:14, it's God telling Moses, and Moses tells the Israelites this. He says, look, listen, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Now, right there, our English word still kind of makes you immediately think of the just get in the ball and wait. But actually what it's saying is stop your arguing, stop your anxious babbling, stop your crying out for a moment, and listen to the instructions that you need to proceed forward and get through this. And if you notice, if you read past that in Exodus 14:14, the angel of the Lord that's been leading in front of them actually He gives them instructions of Moses said, you're gonna walk through the Red Sea. And after he gives these instructions and the Israelites are committed to taking this action and actively moving through and enduring through this, the angel of the Lord actually moves from the front to the rear to defend them from the onslaught that's coming. And so we see a very concrete example. This stillness was a moment of resting from their anxious, frantic crying so they could listen, learn, and obey God in what they were actively going to endure. And so they press on traveling through. So like at first glance, rest and passively enduring may very well look the same. But here's the difference, because they're not the same. Passive is avoiding or will lead to avoiding the response of obedience. But rest is an active step in pursuing it. I'm going to say that one more time. Passive approach to endurance, circling the wagons, battening down the hatches, and just curling up in a ball and praying for things to pass, is avoiding the response of obedience, or it can lead to avoiding the response of obedience. Whereas rest is a part and is an active step in pursuing it. So, another word in the Old Testament, there's a Hebrew word called halak. Say that with me. Halak. Go ahead. Some of you didn't do that. Do it again. Halak. Okay, I'm going to take my word for it that some of you might have done that now. But this word is translated simply and literally as walk, but it means so much more than just walk. It means the way you do life, the way you go about doing things. It's used in that way. And if you look at one of the most famous psalms, if I were to ask you what the most famous psalm is, my bet is the majority of you would say Psalm 23. And if you look at this, if you walk through this, listen to this active, like there is rest in here, but listen to the active language of endurance. I'm going to try to emphasize this as I read it. It's going to be up here on the screen. It said, the psalmist writes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures." And catch this though, right after that contrast with rest, or maybe to support rest, he says, "He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Then he guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk or halak through the darkest valley." Now that sounds like endurance is needed. Some translations are through the valley of the shadow of death, meaning like this is the worst of the worst. And even though I will walk through this, and I may walk through this even now, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you, talking about God, you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, I could lean into that a little bit, how the rod of discipline, that things are not always fun with discipline. In fact, oftentimes the very term discipline that brings just not fun things. But when we talk about spiritual disciplines, when we talk about developing disciplines as people, this is talking about how we are momentarily inconvenienced, and I'm going to phrase it that way because I just saw a psychologist talking about, like, we have blown this out of proportion. We've allowed momentary, small inconveniences to be true, full life derailing crises. And so I'm going to call it how it is. We're tempted to view disciplines as derailing things when actually they are meant to teach us. They are uncomfortable because we have to learn. And so that's what the rod and the staff, though, is served as a protection to ward off things, to ward off wolves and bears. And so the psalmist writes that your rod and your discipline, how you teach me, though it may be uncomfortable, it comforts me. And your staff, obviously, it comforts me. Then he continues, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me. Granted, if he's following you, there's no stationary language there. You are moving on. You're not just curling up in a ball. But surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so when we go back to basics and we look at some of the things that Scripture reveals about God's desire for the church, and we say that the church is to be enduring, but both to be enduring and do things that's effective. We cannot accept that we just hold on to something and pray that the hard times will pass. Though we do that, yes. But rather we hold tightly to the hand of Jesus and to one another, and we walk in obedience. I'm reminded of the text in Hebrews chapter 12. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and you can keep reading through or go back and read through chapter 11 and see example after example after example after example of people who endured, how they pushed through and were obedient to what God was calling them to do and joining and walking with them through. So in reference to all of these examples, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, catch this, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So to do this sustainably and to actually endure, we actually have to grow. We have to use the disciplines that Jesus gave us, and we have to actually, and so we have to do these things, we have to practice these things individually and corporately so that we can begin to excel at the basic work he's given us to do. This is why we've talked so much, and I wish we had done more, about what a rule of life is, why we're encouraging everyone to make a rule of life. This is why sometimes, honestly, and I'm the chief of this, and I own that, and I actually am okay with this, that we have, and I encourage awkward conversations here at Direction Church, because we need to lean into these things that we are tempted to shy away from because we don't want to be inconvenienced by uncomfortableness. And that's why our next study actually might very well take the better part of a year to go through, because we're going to be looking and spending a lot of time in the things that Jesus said. And so today I'm going to wrap up with one more specific example. And I started this with pulling from last week with symbolic about love and representing Jesus and God's love being manifested. As his love's in us, he becomes manifested through us. And so I want to look a little bit at that, what this looks like with this concept of enduring. Okay? So my presupposition is this, what I just summarized, is that if the church is the symbol of Jesus, or in other words, the physical embodiment or ambassador of Jesus here on earth, and how people see God through us is by our love, then we as the church, by default, I'm walking through my logical reasoning here, my presupposition, then we as the church should actually look like and be love. But you could ask the question then, what does agape or what does godly love look like? Well, the most famous text, I think, that I could pull from is 1 Corinthians 13. Verses 4 through 7 says this: love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and catch this last phrasing, always perseveres. In this text, Paul lays out some pretty clear benchmarks for growth and what godly love looks like. These are not things that really come naturally for many of us. I'm going to be honest. When's the last time that you've probably said, instead of love is patient, Patrick is patient. Patrick is kind. I mean, maybe I hope that I come across as patient and kind. But trust me, that's developed and transformation happening when it is. But there are times when it says, instead of saying love, it does not envy, I can't insert my name in there. It says Patrick does not envy. There are times that I still envy. So there's still work to do. And so these are the things that don't come supernaturally from me or maybe from many of us. But the more that we abide in Jesus and put into practice what he said to practice, so we practice these disciplines and walk with him, enduring through the growing pains. It's going to be inconvenient. It's going to hurt at times. But as we endure and encourage one another to grow through these growing pains, the easier and easier and easier this will become. So, this is what I want to end with here today. Here's kind of like the big summary of what I'm trying to shortly, succinctly put here. The health and effectiveness of our church community. So in other words, the enduring quality, how do we be and by who we are and what we be and what we do. So the enduring quality of Direction Church will hinge upon our commitment to learn from, grow in, and apply the words and actions of Jesus to our lives so that we can effectively represent and embody Jesus here in this world. That's what I'm trying to get at. We are held secure in Jesus, yes. But in terms of the enduring vision and desire for his church, if we do not meet his faithfulness and holding on to us with our faithfulness to opening up and applying ourselves to being receptive to the transformation of the Spirit, the enduring thing isn't going to work out. It's not in here, but you can read the letters to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, and each one says, if you don't repent, if you don't change, if you don't return, I will remove your lampstand. I will remove you. I will close your church. That's another translation you could do. I will remove your lampstand is what Jesus himself says. So there is a part of response on our part in this enduring quality. And so the challenge this week, this is not going to be new. We talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago together. And I think I talked about it on the video last week. But the challenge is individually. If you have not landed on a rule of life or a scattered rule, please do that this week. Please set one up. Because part of the enduring hope is that this is going to be a rhythm and a practice that will help us continue on and develop and practice things in good seasons so that when hard seasons come, we don't have to circle the wagons and freak out. But we're saying, hey, we've been practicing this for a long time. We can keep going. We can keep doing what we know to do. And so honestly, and this is the other thing, do it today if you can, because the longer that you put it off, the more likely you're not going to do it. And frankly, it's going to be noticed. If people are growing and you're not, it's going to be noticed. And not to guard you from shame. Actually, Paul writes to the Corinthians, say, I write this for your shame. Because the hope there is that it will wake you up. That this is the most important thing. Jesus is the most important thing. Life in his kingdom and obedience to the king is the most important thing because everything else becomes secondary and tertiary when he enters the room. So corporately, let's talk about what I would like for you to do if you're with people. Have a conversation about maybe what you would like to throw out there as a church family. What we can do with the next quarter to contribute to the endurance of our community. So whether that be to serve more together, maybe that be to go on some prayer walks, to have more vulnerable conversations, maybe memorize scripture. I don't know. There's just some ideas throughout there. But like I said, the rhythms we practice now in the good season and seasons help us better do what we need to do in the bad seasons. And thus and thus live this Jesus-shaped life for the long term. Okay. So your questions to think about here today is that when you think about making it through or enduring through rough seasons, what is your default approach or what has been? And I want you to be honest. This isn't an end-all question. Hopefully this will lead to some other questions and conversation, but has your default approach been to circle the wagons, huddle up in a ball, and just pray to God that you'll make it through? Or has it been to say, I acknowledge that this is a hard thing, and I'm going to actively obey even though it's hard, and I'm going to keep walking, not in isolation, never has this once isolation. So that's the first question. Has your default approach been active or passive? And the second and final question is this. As you think about the endurance and the effectiveness of the church in this world, what is something that you think is important that you practice individually? And how about what's something important that you think we should practice as a community? Like I said, I'm really excited for this next series where we're going. And so spend some time with these questions that will definitely lead into this next series, which will look at the teachings and words of Jesus. And so if you have more questions, let's chat, reach out to somebody in our community. And if not, then I pray that the words and the things of this series have been something that God impresses upon your heart to take. I'm not looking for like a mile-long step, but what's the next step for you? And I pray that you are encouraged and challenged to take that next step, knowing that this should be, and we are trying to become more of a community of a laboratory of grace, to have accountability with each other, but also extend help and grace and love, and to be the embodiment of Jesus in this world. So that's my prayer, my hope for you. And so when we regather next time, we'll be in a new series, and I'm excited about it. So till then, take care.